Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, which is the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. Many of us have been active feminists since the 70s or even the 60s, and our analysis of gender identity ideology has been consistent, pretty much consistent, since Janice Raymond, a radical feminist, wrote The Transsexual Empire in 1979. So we were not surprised when this new attack on women came along, and we haven't changed our fundamental analysis, which is basically radical feminist analysis. So this is a great place to be if you want to understand what's going on. Generally, what happens with people who are worried or concerned about gender identity ideology say they have no idea what's going on or why it happened, whereas we actually do, and we have a very long-standing and unchanged analysis, which has been consistent, like I said, for a very long time. In 2018, we wrote a declaration on women's sex-based rights, which lays out our position. It's been signed by 39,256 people from 160 countries and is supported by 543 organisations. Today, our speakers are Anna Val from LGB State or LGB organization in Spain. So we're going to hear from her, and then we're going to hear from Lauren Levey from the USA about the meeting with Reem Alsalem on forms of sex-based violence against women and girls, new frontiers and emerging issues. We'll also hear from Dianne Post on the same topic. And then we're going to hear from Thistle from Women's Liberation Radio News, The Rhythms of Life, how to keep on keeping on in our global sisterhood. Anna Val is from Spain. She is a lesbian activist of LGB Estate, or State, a group of lesbian, gay and bisexual people concerned about the problem of people who feel same-sex attraction. She's co-founder of Mujeres Hablan, a small project that was born to give voice to the networks on Instagram and X that already has thousands of participants. She is already also a member of Feminists of Catalonia, and she's going to tell us about the LGB organization in Spain.
Buenas tardes, es un honor estar aquí en la Women's Declaration International. Soy Ana Val, como bien me han presentado, miembro de LGB Asociación. La asociación nace de ponernos en una serie de personas en común, homosexuales y bisexuales, que viendo la deriva identitaria, misógena y homófoba, que esto hay que decirlo muy claro, es homófoba también, de todo el tejido asociativo del colectivo, en el cual hay más letras que ni se esfuerzan en explicar qué representan ni quién son. Llevan a cabo ataques principalmente contra mujeres y encima lo hacen en nuestro nombre y en base a unos supuestos derechos humanos que nadie sabe explicar. En realidad, en esto yo creo que podemos estar bastante de acuerdo, que somos muchas lesbianas a las que se nos dice que no aceptar una pareja sexual hombre, porque se autodenomina mujer trans, es transfobia. Y que somos nosotras las que tenemos que adaptarnos y dar cabida a personas con pene para no ser transodiantes. Claro, esto es lo primero que hace como lesbiana que llevas toda la vida reconociéndote, es que te explote la cabeza. No es comprensible. Tal como otras asociaciones internacionales, nosotros reclamamos los derechos basados en el sexo, ya que si tomamos el género como medida, que nosotros sabemos que es un constructo y unos roles y estereotipos sexistas que llevamos toda la vida luchando contra ello, que cada uno puede ser lo que sea, se puede vestir o amar a quien quiera y a quien le parezca, pero no podemos aceptar el género como una identidad, y mucho menos ahora que dependa nuestra orientación sexual de cómo se sienta o decida definirse otra persona. También observamos aquí en España, por ejemplo, que hay diferentes leyes trans autonómicas que se lleva haciendo desde hace bastantes años ya, y diferentes protocolos educativos también, en donde se destruye la coeducación en favor de la diversidad y en donde el profesorado se convierte en la policía del género. Y esto basándose en estos estereotipos sexistas que nosotros criticamos y que creíamos ya superados. Ahora resulta que el sexo se asigna y se puede nacer en un cuerpo equivocado, y que hasta puedes elegir la identidad del género y que nadie te puede discutir, porque si no, transfobia. Te evitan transfobia y anulan tus argumentos. Sabemos por los informes como el de la doctora Kass y un informe también que hicimos en Cataluña, el informe Transit, realizado por feministas de Cataluña, con datos del Servicio de Salud, que la radiografía de lo que está pasando es una calcomanía en casi todas las zonas geográficas. O sea, está pasando en todos los sitios igual. El aumento exponencial es brutal y se está produciendo en los países con este tipo de servicios. Se da en niñas y mujeres jóvenes. Y es verdad que no todas, pero sí que hay un gran número muy elevado de personas que serán homosexuales si se les dejara crecer, descubrirse y explorarse. Y en cuanto a la asociación, pues evidentemente tenemos en contra al resto de colectivos. Al final tuvimos que dar un paso adelante y decirles que no hablen en nuestro nombre, que no nos representan y que hay muchas personas homosexuales y bisexuales que no están de acuerdo con lo queer y con el transgenerismo. Y que además somos conscientes que este tipo de leyes también afectan en los recursos a personas con disforia, de verdad. Y de momento, pues como somos una organización pequeñita, pues recibimos el mismo hate que cualquier tipo de organización feminista que está en contra de la ideología del género. Más o menos lo llevamos bien, ¿vale? Pero tenemos que estar ahí y tenemos que estar señalando que no estamos de acuerdo. Y tenemos que ser esas personas que digamos, oigan, lo que están haciendo ustedes también es homofobia y con nuestra palabra que no cuenten. También nos encontramos en la situación que debido al bloqueo informativo que existe, hay muchas lesbianas que no conocen el peligro real de que el lesbianismo desaparezca, fruto de una manipulación brutal que están sufriendo las niñas y adolescentes en el colegio y en los productos culturales, para admitir a personas con pene como parejas sexuales. Lo que se persigue con esto es que el 100% de la población sea falocentrista. Y esto es que ninguna mujer se llegue a plantear en el futuro las relaciones sexuales sin pene, porque habría desaparecido en ese futuro la definición de mujer biológica y cualquier hombre podría llegar a ser mujer. Lo que vemos aquí es como el patriarcado es una combinación de violencia contra la mujer y con acabar con cualquier tipo de resistencia de crear espacios libres de hombres. El lesbianismo es una práctica peligrosa para el patriarcado y por eso la ofensiva es tan cruda contra las lesbianas. Y por ello uno de los objetivos de la asociación es concienciar a lesbianas que no son del todo conscientes de ese peligro para que pasen a la acción. Y bueno, en definitiva, nosotros creemos que el transgenerismo y la teoría queer no deja de ser un caballo de Troya metido en el feminismo y en los derechos de los homosexuales y no dejan de ser unas terapias de conversión, con la validación social de personas que no tienen ni idea de lo que esto implica y que además lo instan desde los gobiernos y las instituciones para aplicar políticas misógenas y homófobas y que atentan contra la salud de menores y que está amparado en unos supuestos derechos que al final son deseos de los hombres y nunca saben explicar cuáles son estos derechos. Y luego, por último, voy a hacer una pequeña cuña publicitaria. Eh, el 10 de mayo se van a hacer unas jornadas con varias asociaciones importantes contra el borrado, seguramente estemos nosotros también, para contrarrestar unas jornadas que va a hacer Naisen que es una asociación transgenerista de padres de niños trans. Y consideramos que esto es un atentado contra la salud de los niños y pues hacer un poco, invitar a las personas que vamos a intentar pues hacer unas jornadas poniendo los puntos sobre las is de lo que hacen los otros y por qué estamos en contra de esas terapias experimentales contra menores. Y ya está. Por mi parte, daros las gracias porque ha sido una gran oportunidad de estar aquí con vosotras y por los medios que habéis puesto para poder dar mi charla en mi idioma natal. Y muchas gracias.
So we're now going to go to our next speaker, who is Lauren Levey. Lauren Levey is a board member of WDI USA and also serves as coordinator of its Lesbian Caucus and coordinator of its state legislative advocacy team. Lauren also serves as coordinator of Lesbian Bill of Rights International, LBORI, and she's going to talk to us today about a meeting with Reem Alsalem on forms of sex-based violence against women and girls. So thank you so much, Lauren, for coming on and for doing all the work that you do promoting the sex-based rights of women and girls, and for telling us about this important intervention. Okay, over to you, Lauren.
I was here on FQT 3 weeks ago talking about the statements that were submitted by the WDI USA Lesbian Caucus and by Lesbian Bill of Rights International, or LBORI, to the United Nations CEDAW committee. The topic of both statements was the harms of gender stereotypes and how to combat them. I think that it was specifically because of the CEDAW submission by LBORI that I was invited to a 3-hour online live group consultation with Reem Alsalem, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, which was held March 19th. I was completely surprised by the invitation. I've never done anything like that. And of course, I was delighted to get the chance to speak directly to Reem Alsalem about lesbians. The session was recorded, and so was the chat, but those recordings will not be made public in order to allow the consultants to feel that they could speak freely. So for that reason, I don't feel free to tell you the substance of what any particular individual said. However, I will tell you some of the interesting themes that were raised. The special rapporteur provided 4 subtopics for the consultants to be prepared to discuss, all in relation to the main topic, which was forms of sex-based violence against women and girls, new frontiers, and emerging issues. The 4 subtopics were: first, language; second, sex-based violence and new technologies; third, sexual orientation and sex-based violence; and fourth, recommendations for her report. I didn't prepare to speak on new technologies because I figured correctly, as it turned out, that other people would be much better informed about things like AI, for instance. I did prepare to speak about language and sexual orientation and to make recommendations, all with respect to lesbians. It was interesting to see who showed up for the Zoom call. There were about 40 consultants present. I think all but one was a woman. Overall, they seemed generally critical of transgenderism in varying degrees, although they weren't all radical feminists, but some were. There was at least one proponent of true trans, that is the notion that some people truly were born in the wrong sex body. And there was a small amount of frankly personal criticism of the special rapporteur for her continuing stance against transgenderism. I was happy to see that there were some familiar faces from WDI present, also including Dianne Post, who will be speaking after me. And I'm looking forward to hearing Diane's report on the consultation. There was also some private networking happening in the chat, at least for me, so that was a bonus. The first hour was spent on language and sexual orientation. Those 2 subtopics were put together. Each remaining topic, that is new technologies and then the recommendations, Each of those was allotted about an hour. Combining language and sexual orientation made sense because, as it turned out, there were only 2 consultants who represented lesbian organizations, and we both got a chance to speak during that first hour. It was generally acknowledged that sexual orientation is currently under-discussed, and that when it is discussed, it's often linked with gender identity, which makes the discussion useless, of course. Furthermore, current discussions of lesbians often omit those lesbians who don't identify as lesbians, but instead identify as men. It was also mentioned that more research needs to be done specifically on lesbians. For instance, domestic violence in lesbian relationships was one topic that was suggested. There was some general agreement that conventional meanings of words like woman and lesbian should be used universally, and that on the one hand, neither woman nor lesbian should include men. And on the other hand, neither the word woman nor the word lesbian should be banned, as was suggested in a list put together recently by the Trump administration of words not to be used by US federal agencies, including woman. But girl is apparently okay. It was a multinational group of consultants, so one important point that was made about language was that many languages don't signify gender in the same ways as English or Romance languages do, for instance, in having differentiated pronouns. And some languages don't have separate words for sex and gender. I know I've seen some bad translations where sex is actually translated into English as gender, which may or may not be intentional, right? Someone suggested that a solution that would translate well would be to say, instead of gender, something like socially constructed sex. Other related suggestions included just stop making English the default language and standardize the translation of certain phrases. Next, technological exploitation of women and girls was discussed, including so-called deep fake pornography and related use of technologies such as AI. This was completely new territory to me and quite interesting. It became clear to me in the course of that part of the consultation that the frequent focus in AI discussions on the issue of the presence or absence of consent is maybe misguided. The important issue is that all pornography is violence, and most of that violence is performed on women and girls, and that the whole notion of consent is completely inadequate in the context of sexual activity, which should be desired, not just consented to, right? I also learned the appalling fact that AI has already learned to be discriminatory and violent toward women, as young as it is. AI already needs to be re-educated. The good news, apparently, is that there's at least one woman who has begun working on this project. The final segment of the consultation was devoted to recommendations for the special rapporteur to address governments. Over and over again, consultants pointed out that language is not neutral. It has the power to shape thought. For instance, people like us are now called the anti-transgender movement. This frames us as a hate group, and in some places as enemies of the state. There was broad agreement that women and lesbians need to be fastidious about language, framing our concepts accurately in our own terms and avoiding use of terms created by opposing interests for the purpose of discrediting us. I had raised my virtual hand the moment the final segment on recommendations began, but the end of the 3 hours was approaching rapidly, and it became evident that I would not get the chance to speak a second time. So I put the recommendations I prepared into the chat for Reem Alsalem to review at her leisure and for the other consultants to see in case they were interested. So I'm going to read you what I said on behalf of El Bori about language and about sexual orientation, followed by the recommendations that I put into the chat. Lesbian Bill of Rights International, or El Bori, is an international network of radical feminist lesbian organizations that have all adopted the Lesbian Bill of Rights, or the LBOR. The LBOR is written in the form of a legislative bill that could be introduced anywhere with minor modifications. It consists of a descriptive list of unjust conditions that lesbians are subjected to, followed by an enumeration of lesbian rights that would, if implemented, address those unjust conditions. We have member organizations in Germany, New Zealand, Australia, Norway, Italy, and the United States. We believe that our radical feminist analysis offers the most realistic and comprehensive tools for understanding and combating the universal structures of male domination and female subordination globally. We encourage you to visit our website, lborinternational.com, where you will find the Lesbian Bill of Rights and articles that we have written on language. First, the LBOR defines lesbian as a human female homosexual or a woman or girl who is exclusively same-sex attracted. If lesbian is redefined to include any person who claims a lesbian identity, then the word lesbian becomes meaningless, and the demographic of woman-loving women is in effect erased from public discourse. Second, lesbians should be referred to as lesbians, not as LGBTQ+, not as LGB, not as gay. It's best not to use language to force team lesbians with any other demographic, because lesbians are uniquely situated and we need unique protections. Third, the effects of forcibly erasing the actual lesbian demographic in language, whether by enabling anyone at all to claim a lesbian identity, or by forced teaming lesbians with non-lesbian demographics or concepts, lead directly to today's topic number 3, that is sexual orientation and violence. Erasure and forced teaming lead to violence. As to sexual orientation and sex-based violence, first, so-called hate speech laws are being used to prevent sex realists from calling a man a man. Al-Bori has written an article on the topic of so-called hate speech laws that can be found on our website. Second, coercive conversion therapy is back, now coming from psychotherapy proponents of gender identity. Simultaneously, lawmakers are going through the motions of banning conversion therapy, but their bills are forced teaming gender identity with sexual orientation. Since gender identity and sexual orientation are in direct contradiction to each other, such laws are completely useless, except to double bind therapists and other counselors. Al-Bori has written an article on conversion therapy that can be found on our website. Third, there is extensive social shaming of lesbians for having a transphobic genital preference or something like that. And fourth, the shaming of lesbian results at the law and policy level in loss of public lesbian spaces, as in Australia. Here are some consequences of lesbian shaming. The term lesbian has come to include heterosexual men and also to reference a category of pornography that caters to men. These have become the only acceptable uses of the term lesbian in so-called progressive circles. Hostility toward any lesbians who use the word to exclude men is internalized as shame in young or new lesbians. This hostility creates pressure on lesbians not only to identify as anything other than lesbian, but to engage in sexual relations with men or else be labeled an exclusionary Nazi bigot. Lesbian shaming creates unjust obstacles to new lesbians who want to come out as woman-loving women, and it is driven in part by formerly lesbian supportive organizations that are now captured by transgender ideology. In many places, most notably but not exclusively in Australia, lesbians are prohibited by law from gathering publicly as exclusively female homosexuals, either to plan advocacy on their own behalf or to meet socially in single-sex spaces such as lesbian bars or public meeting halls outside the presence of predatory men. As a result of increased erasure, hostility, shame, threats of violence, and outright acts of violence that target lesbians in every country, It is currently trending for new lesbians to carefully avoid the term lesbian to describe themselves and instead use terms such as queer, masc, meaning masculine, or non-binary. Consequently, the numbers of self-acknowledged lesbians are greatly reduced. Official data collection is skewed. There is damaging political division within the lesbian community, and lesbian political influence is further diminished. As a result of all of these factors, there is a scarcity of visible, positive lesbian messaging and role models, and many lesbians are socially and politically isolated with no viable lesbian community, leaving them particularly susceptible to various forms of violence, from random physical attacks on the street to so-called psychological counseling that can range from a diagnosis of pathology to a diagnosis of so-called gender dysphoria, to numbing medications, to conversion therapy so that they will accept male sexual partners, and to harmful medical interventions of wrong sex hormones and surgeries to disguise the female sex characteristics. Because why would anyone want to be a lesbian under such conditions? It understandably seems easier to mutilate your healthy female body with harmful drugs and surgeries that will seriously impact your health and your longevity. While I was speaking, the special rapporteur was listening carefully. She nodded frequently, and when I was finished, she thanked me for my specificity. Okay, here are the recommendations that I put into the chat. Coherent legal definitions consistent with those of the LBOR of sex-based terms, including woman, girl, lesbian, sex, gender, man, and boy. Legal protections for lesbians as a sex and as a sexual orientation, as defined in the LBOR. A human female homosexual or a woman or girl who is exclusively same-sex attracted. Protection of single-sex public spaces where lesbians can lawfully exclude all men and boys. Reference in law and policy to lesbians as a discrete category with political needs and interests that are separate from those of gay men, bisexual individuals, or individuals who claim a gender identity. The recognition that lesbian is a sexual orientation and not a gender identity. Recognition in law and policy that lesbians are first and foremost women and must be included in all legal protections for women, regardless of their nonconformity with gender stereotypes. For example, lesbians should never be excluded from women's public bathrooms, no matter how masculine they may present. Recognition in law and policy that lesbians have a right to protection as lesbians, whether or not lesbianism is believed to be innate and immutable. So far, there is no credible evidence that lesbian has an immutable biological basis. That is, lesbianism is not like race, but requires legal protection anyway. Legal protection from forced conversion therapy and from forced sterilization. The right of minors to be free of indoctrination into gender identity ideology and its resulting disfiguring surgeries and drugs, and the right to grow up lesbian, gay, or bisexual, as most trans-identifying youths most likely would, absent indoctrination. The right to have lesbians' sexual and romantic boundaries protected in law and policy. That is, the right to avoid men and actively seek women. This would include, for instance, the right of online dating sites to exclude men from the lesbian pool. The right to be free from discrimination in employment, housing, physical and mental health care, and public accommodations. The right not to have lesbian relationships and sexuality fetishized in media and in porn. The right to be free from discrimination in adopting children. The right to be free from all sex stereotypes or gender without discrimination. Support for detransitioned women who are lesbians, both within the lesbian community and by the medical and pharmaceutical industries. The right to speak freely in public about the reality of sex without being shut down under so-called hate speech laws. offensive speech must be protected. In fact, offensive speech is the only speech that needs legal protection. I saved free speech for last because I believe that free speech is necessary to support every other recommendation. So that's it. If you'd like to see my statement written out, you can find it on the Elbory website, which again is lborinternational.com. Thank you.
So Dianne is an international human rights attorney who's been fighting for women's rights since 1980. She's going to talk about the meeting as well with Reem Alsalem on forms of sex-based violence against women and girls, new frontiers and emerging issues, and some of the so what you were saying at that meeting. Okay, over to you, Dianne.
So I won't be very long, but I did want you to see my shirt. This is what an old lesbian looks like. As far as shaming lesbians. So WDI was well represented at this meeting. There was a presentation from Spain, the US, and Canada. In addition to others, Lauren was there, but with a different group. And another woman was there, but also with a different group. And I spoke about the things that I had already written about. One is my work with centering women in the US to stop referring to women as body parts and body processes, thereby degrading women to be less than human and some kind of other animal that we can talk about in that way. And so that was part of what I said. And also, we didn't get to speak twice. I was a second speaker after our Spain presenter. And I thought it was fair that I didn't get to speak again because if you try to give everybody an opportunity. So I never got to speak about the AI implications either. However, from my meetings with the CEDAW group, the US CEDAW group, there are two important things going on. One is a group that has started about AI and the bad learning that AI is getting from scouring the internet, which is full of negativity and pornography against women. So they have started a group on countering that. So that's, I sent that information in later. And there is also a presentation about a group, which I haven't yet found, which blocks men on your internet feed. So that if you have a woman-only group, they have figured out a way to identify the males and block them. And so that I thought was great. And you know, we just saw it here today, but that is a problem that we need to address. Many countries were presented in this consultation, 2 from Spain, 3 from the US, 3 from Canada, but in addition, Scotland, Nigeria, UK, Sweden, Costa Rica, Lebanon, Croatia were all represented, at least in the time that I was there. I had to leave a few minutes early, and not everyone spoke out of the consultants that were present. And there were a couple that spoke against the concept and were pro-trans, which was obvious as well. And Reem was very careful to be sure to give them time because you don't want the accusation that you're not listening to, or that you are listening only to one side. So Megan spoke the following day on the issue of consent, and she's the one that wrote the WDI paper that we submitted on consent, and she's going to be speaking at a later time on that. She couldn't be here today. So that's all I've got from my presentation. Thank you very much.
And we'll move on now to our next speaker. Thistle is a grassroots media activist with Women's Liberation Radio News, a singer-songwriter, convinced it's best to bail out this sinking ship called humanity in our sisterhood and unity. She is going to talk about the rhythms of life, how to keep on keeping on in our global sisterhood. And we're also going to talk about Women's Liberation Radio News, the fantastic radio show that you've been running for ages. But anyway, welcome, Thistle. So can you tell, some women don't know about Women's Liberation Radio News. Can you tell them about what it is? And we'll get the website up in a minute, but maybe just to introduce it a bit.
Back in 2012, I applied to do a workshop at the Anarchist Book Fair in the Twin Cities. And it was on anarchist feminism. And I didn't know that it was transphobic, but apparently it was. And so I was barred participation. Well, I wasn't completely banned from the conference, but my workshop was canceled. So I got really curious and I contacted Sheila Jeffries, who was in the midst of writing her book, Gender Hurts, political analysis of the politics of a feminist analysis of the politics of transgenderism. And so I contacted her and I told her about this experience. And I wanted to teach my community in Madison about Sheila's work. And I invited her to come on to the community radio station, 89.9 FM WORT in Madison. And we had 6 months leading up to it. And people, as we were doing the advertising, started attacking me, neighbors, friends, and telling me, you can't do this show. She's a hateful bigot. What's happened to you, Thistle? And I'm like, no, she's a scholar. She's got something to say. This is going to be great. We're going to clear some things up. We're going to have civil dialogue. And so I went forward with the show. But then there were these silent grumblers who anonymously complained to the station's leadership and said that I was a hateful bigot and all this stuff. And they acquiesced to their demands and they banned me from the station. And so that's when I decided, I needed to start my own community radio station online and use all of the things that they taught me at WORT to become a feminist community powered radio station online. And so WLRN was born, and we released our first podcast in 2016, in May of 2016. So about 9 years ago, and we have not missed a month since then. And it's collectively crafted and stitched together by our wonderful sound engineer that we had for so long, Jenna DeQuarto. She was with us for like 8 years, I think. 8 years. Yeah, she was with us for 8 years. And now we've got Ann Castile, who was trained by Jenna. And actually, we have room for more sound engineers and producers. And really, the way that WLRN works is it's like everyone turns a screw, and everyone's screw is important for the podcast to get out. And nothing is too big or too small, that all these tasks, and we're all working together in order to make sure that it happens every month, right?
What interests me is that the anarchists were really ahead of the game in terms of labeling us TERFs, that it seems like, because Helen Steele had that thing as well, that she was kicked out of an anarchist book fair quite early on, that it seems as if the anarchists had developed the pro-trans ideology within their highly politicized groups, and the fact that, and the exclusion of us, that we were verboten to be. But can you tell me about what you think, how it panned out, how sophisticated were the anarchists there, and did they all know, or were there just a few who were very sort of dogmatically trying to kick you out?
No, they didn't. This was very early on. And so one of my anarchist friends, who later became a trans activist, because people weren't used to being canceled back then either. It was not as commonplace as it is now. And so my workshop was canceled, and he was like, hey, there's the Facebook event page. Let's post on there in protest. And because, anarchists we're in favor of free speech. And we think that, I think you should be able to hold this workshop. And so I did, I posted on there, and then, oh my gosh, I was just bombarded with, I had never seen anything like this before in my life. And now it's like every day on the internet, but I mean, lambasted by just, there were hundreds of people on this Facebook anarchist Facebook book fair, Facebook event page. And, these men in dresses. I remember too, and this is so weird. It's like one of those, it's a weird memory, because somebody posted this little video of men, big men in dresses with wigs, getting out of a car and going into a McDonald's and being all like, "Hur, hur, hur." And I was like, what is going on here? It was very confusing, but yeah, it was like use of the internet to bully and gang up on this one individual. And I got threats of violence. They threatened to break my guitar, land me in the hospital. you know. And so being the person that I am, instead of, I mean, I'm a sociologist. I studied sociology, and I was a little bit like fascinated by this, and I couldn't let it go. I was like, what is this? You know, and so that's why I thought, honestly, naively, I thought in 2014, we're just going to clear this up. We'll get Sheila Jeffries on the community radio station, and then everyone's going to understand, and it'll all be good, you know. And that is not what happened. I got banned, and I started WLRN. So parallel to what the trans propaganda that WORT is putting out every month, we're putting out our TERF protest podcast.
Yeah.
Some of the members of the collective don't want it to be called that. But I will say our WLRN news and cultural information podcast we're putting out every month. I do have a master's degree from the University of Michigan in medieval Spanish literature, of all things. And so I do like to read and analyze literature, and also to analyze society. And so that was a good fit for this protest. But, you know, the fact that we've done it every month, it's like, we've done it as a protest. And then thankfully, all these very talented women have come along. Like I mentioned, Jenna DeQuarto, who has a sound engineering degree, you know, and Anne Castile, who's now following in her footsteps, who is ready and willing to train you, sisters, if you want to apply to be another sound engineer and producer, no experience necessary. And like I was saying before about each of us turns a screw, we're very relaxed in a lot of ways, because we have so many women in the process. And we have a guidelines for like a code of conduct that really helps us work together as a team.
Maybe 9 years ago, I started listening. I somehow found WLRN many years ago, and I've listened for a really long time. And I would really recommend everybody listen to this, because look, and listen to everything now, because there's like 106 editions. But you can go backwards in time. You can see there's apps, it's unbelievable quality. There's, in terms of the really interesting subjects. Well, anyway, listen, everybody, it is unbelievably good. So you're going to have to go on your own.
I want to say that intro song is by Jenna DeQuarto, and I sang harmony lines on it. And so not only are we a news collective, but we are a collective that's interested in creating media in general to get radical feminist ideas out there, analysis out there, and women's news out there. And the quality has just increased through the years. I would say, you know, it's been a journey. And that's why I titled the talk what I did. It's like how to keep on keeping on. And you know, there are months where, like Bernadette, she's not here today. You know what I mean? It's like, and you've got a deadline because we're going to do this. This is going to happen, you know? And now that we've done it for 9 years, it's just like, even when things just get so frustrating, out of spite, I personally always make sure that we put something out there. But it's worked out, though, that we've had enough women to not be overly burdened, I would say, and that we have that rhythm too of once a month, which obviously goes along with the woman's cycle, menstrual cycle. And so there's like there's a gynergy to the type of culture we create as the WLRN collective. It's very different than working with men, and there's a lot of like space and respect between the members of WLRN, and yet a lot of cohesion. The volunteers who are members of the collective, there's a tab on the website that says, I think it's called Volunteer for WLRN, and it'll tell you how you can become a member or a volunteer. And we're always looking for new members, sisters, so I can't emphasize that enough. If no experience necessary, that's very much in the tradition of community radio activism, which WORT is in that tradition. Public access, they have hundreds of volunteers at their radio station. So I encourage you to check it out. You know, sometimes it's only like 2 hours a month, the little screw that or once every other month. But it helps so much to be able to put the podcast out. There's Wolf Summer Camp this summer that I'm hoping that women will be able to go to in Oregon. And the Wolf Summer Camp organizers are in the chat. I just want to say hi. And we're going to be doing Turf in USA, which this is a design that was created by Natasha Petrov, who was a member of WLRN for 3 years. It was created a few years ago. And now we have a variety show with lots of entertainment, turf entertainment called Turf in USA that we're going to perform at the Wolf Summer Camp. And we hope to perform at other places too. So, and I'll perform some songs from that variety show in a second here.
So Thistle, you said you'd maybe be able to sing us a couple of songs.
But this one goes out to Jessica JG. This one goes out to Jessica Gonzalez. She, like I said, she was the first one to donate on our fundraiser. And this song is about some experiences that Jessica and I have had in recent history. You'll hear a lot about what has happened to me individually and how we had the Sisters for Sisters conference, and then we had a bunch of speakers' corners. And I'm not putting up stickers anymore, but this is from 2021, 2022, 2023. Here we go. I got a pocket full of Turf Collective stickers, and I'm riding my bike through the city. I look up and see power lines and cars, but also the flowers so pretty. Yesterday was 90, today it's 45. The fronts keep rolling in. And from the seat of my bicycle, sisters, I tell ya, it's starting to look rather grim, but I will ride on. To see what I see, I will ride on. To be free, 'cause a simple act of motion paired with symmetry, it puts my mind at ease. I was cited with a hate crime for putting up stickers like these. But don't worry, sisters, I know how to move like the breeze. You just keep pedaling forward and you don't bother to look behind. Pretty soon, friends, there'll be stickers of every kind. Yeah, I will ride on. To see what I see, I will ride on. To be free, 'cause a simple act of motion paired with symmetry, it'll put your mind at ease. Oh, but I don't mean to say it gets easier as you go along. No matter how you play, something easily could go very terribly wrong. And it does. Just 'cause. Oh, but I have got to be free to fly high with the breeze. My mind will always be free. Soar high with the breeze. So now I've got a pocket full of Turf Collective stickers, and I'm riding my bike through the city. I look up and see ridiculous TRAs, but also the women so sturdy. Yesterday was freezing, today it's boiling hot. We all know how this'll end. So we've got to band together and have each other's backs. Sisters, if we're gonna win, so let's all ride on. To see what we see, let's all ride on. To be free, 'cause a simple act of motion paired with symmetry. I said a simple act of motion paired with symmetry. It'll put your mind at ease. Mind at ease. Mind at ease. Mind at ease. All right, so that one was called A Simple Act of Motion because as I've been attacked, something that has saved my life has been me being able to get on my bicycle and ride, just ride and ride and ride. And obviously, I did have some stickers sometimes in my pockets when I was riding, and I got into a lot of trouble, but now I'm just riding my bike because it saved me. So this is a turf love song, and it's encouraging us all to have like that gynergy, that feeling of excitement when we see each other and greet each other, and to even flirt with each other. That is something that I really miss about Mishfest. And anyway, so but it's a serious love song. It is a love song. Here we go. When I told you I'm a warrior, that I'd learned it from my mom, you said, babe, don't worry, I'll be your steady from now on. And I'm not sure I believe you this early on the ride, but the tide, oh the tide, and with you by my side, I get carried away. I get carried away. The closer I get to you, the more I worry you won't stay. You'll see all my brokenness, then politely wander away. Oh, your light shines through my window, revealing wreckage in the way. But then the tide, oh the tide, crashes through on this ride, and I get carried away, babe. You carry me away. Please stay. Oh, the waters keep rushing around my house, and I'm overcome by the waves. But by some bright, brave miracle, I just might be able to save myself and then come running home to you. We roam the streets, feeling complete. looking for a place to express ourselves. Oh, and I know that look in your eye, it's a glimmer of what could be if we try to turf this tide, rising up side by side. Oh, let's get carried away. Let's get carried away. What do you say?
Brilliant.
Let's go turfing now. Everybody's learning how. Come on, baby, turf with me. Come on, baby, turf with me. If everybody had a notion of reality, then everybody be turfing from sea to shining sea. You'd see them wearing their turf bangs, going barefoot too. A butchy hairdo, turfing USA. You'd see them turfing at Wolf Camp, Indianapolis too, at San Francisco Turf Central, in states red and blue, all over the internet, down FQT way. Everybody's gone turfing USA. We'll all be planning our route. We're gonna take the bus. We're waxing down our turf boards. We can't wait for August. We'll be gone for the summer on women's lands to stay. Everybody's gone turfing USA. All the women are turfing USA. All the women are turfing US. Let's go turfing now. Everybody's learning how. Come on, baby, turf with me.